The 700 Club presents Heart to Heart with Sheila Walsh.
Welcome to Heart to Heart. The Jesus Movement showed my guest today how music with a pop appeal can also be based on the gospel. As founder of Contemporary Christian Music Magazine, or CCM as we know and love it, he continues to bridge the gap between faith and culture by giving us an inside look into Christian music. Here are just a few of the recording artists CCM has featured over the past 14 years. Maybe you're thinking, I didn't even know there was a magazine like that out there. Well, towards the end of the show, we're going to give you an 800 number where you can call and get your own subscription. My husband and I read it every month. Well, John says he wants CCM to make people think. To tell us more about the growth of contemporary Christian music, please welcome from Nashville, Tennessee, John Styll. Welcome. Good to see you. You know, it's funny, over all the years, I know your face, we've talked, we've had dinner, and I knew very little about how you ever got to be where you are today. So I wondered if you'd take us back just a little bit. I know you were brought up in a believing family. Were you a young boy when that became real and significant to you?
I went to church like good kids did. It wasn't until I was about 12 that I really came face to face with what the gospel was, being born again. I was at a Christian camp in 1963. And then from then, I really got involved in leadership of our church youth group and things like that, and at that point became aware of how contemporary culture and church culture were so far out of sync. And obviously there's good reasons for that, but there's also some things that are not good about that.
What about your own musical tastes and those of your peers? Was what you were doing within the church in youth music and what you were listening to on your car stereo on the way home different?
Well, there was quite a discrepancy. I remember specifically driving to church. This is probably 68, 69. I was a junior, senior in high school, doing rehearsals for one of those youth musicals that the parents all thought was real hip, but the kids knew was like Gag Me with a Spoon, you know, although we didn't say that back then. Yeah, and because we were listening to Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and the Rolling Stones on the radio, and then we'd go do this thing that was supposed to be rock and roll, but all the kids knew wasn't. At that point, I began to wonder, why can't the gospel be more culturally relevant? Because if we're going to speak to a generation, we have to speak its language, and we clearly weren't. We were making the church comfortable, but obviously it wasn't going to get outside the church.
What happened, do you think, when the Jesus Movement hit in California? What precipitated that? What birthed that?
I think the counterculture movement, the hippie movement of the 60s, proved to be an empty experience for a lot of people. They were told that, you know, free love and, you know, peace and all that stuff was the answer, and obviously that's not the answer. Jesus Christ is the answer, and the kids started to discover that, and there was a church there that welcomed young people, because the image of the church was you had to put on, you know, the suit and tie before you could come, and at Calvary Chapel you could come in jeans and bare feet and you were accepted. A lot of musicians began to congregate there and were encouraged to just make the music they knew, and which was contemporary, you know, rock type music, but with new lyrics about their newfound faith in Christ.
Were you involved with what was happening then?
Indirectly. I was there, you know, around that scene and at the time, and very intrigued by it. But I'm not a musician. I wasn't in one of the bands or anything like that, but I was just a close observer.
Was your entree into the scene radio as opposed to publishing?
Right. Through getting to know some of these folks around the Orange County, Calvary Chapel area, I got involved in doing a radio program in Southern California. And I really didn't know much about the broad-based world of Christian music. I had never heard of Bill Gaither, if you can imagine such a thing, back in 1974 when this program began. But through doing the program, got to know Bill Gaither and a lot of the other people doing Christian music. And it was through doing this daily program in Southern California that and as contemporary Christian music began to grow as a national phenomenon, became aware that the East Coast and the West Coast were not communicating very effectively, and there was a lot of curiosity, a lot of controversy with this new form of music, and there needed to be some form of communications, and print seemed to be the ideal way to go. So we started it as a tabloid newspaper back in '78.
So when did it become, as we see today, CCM Contemporary Christian Music Magazine?
We changed to the magazine size and the glossy paper, I think, in '82.
And when you sat down around a table, what was your heart and vision for your magazine? What did you want to do?
My heart has always been to try to make the gospel more culturally relevant. Not to change the gospel message, but just change the package that it comes in. To try to speak to a generation. And so I've always hoped that through radio, television, records, music, whatever medium, we can make accessible to people by speaking the language that they like and understand. Not that dissimilar from making an English translation of the Bible from, you know, a language that we don't understand, so that we can read it and understand it.
How do you handle the controversy? Because it is a controversial magazine. At times when I read your letters page, I wish I could go hold of some of these folks and go, do. Because sometimes people get so incensed about particular issues.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Privately or publicly?
Both.
Well, we want to have a little get a life stamp, you know, sometimes, and do that on the end of some of these letters, but we try in print to respond a little more gently. I personally, when we receive letters from people like that, my heart goes out to them and I want to help them. That's more a real emotion than getting angry. I mean, I'm kind of nonplussed by it too. I'm kind of like amazed that people could think the way that they do. And frankly, there's times where we've been nailed and hauled on the carpet for a good reason, you know, and I try to be open to receive criticism when it needs to be received, and it certainly does. I don't claim to be perfect, and under deadline pressure we do make mistakes.
How do you decide what to print? I mean, if a letter comes in that you think is so out there and so negative and so nasty, do you have a plumb line that you measure things by? What do you do?
We try to print a representative sample of what people are saying. With a little, we restrain a little bit from the really out there stuff. We don't print the really out there stuff. But if people are, whatever people are talking about, if we've done something and we're getting 7 negative letters out of 10, we'll try to print them in that ratio.
Okay, let's talk about one of those issues.
Okay.
Let's talk about the Carmen Review.
The Carmen Review.
Because that caused a lot of stir. I was aware of it even amongst my friends here, that you reviewed an album and you did not like it.
No.
Talk to us about why you chose to do that and what you didn't like.
Okay. Well, first of all, here's an album that we knew was going to be enormously popular. It debuted at #1 on our charts. An artist who is undeniably popular. However, we really believe that there were some areas that he needed to be criticized for in terms of being a little, what we saw was, you know, questionable theology on a couple of things, and we feel called to help make people be more responsible. And
is that ever abusing your position to do that?
I think, you know, one of the guys I work with, my partner in the magazine, said he felt it was unfair of me to do the review because, you know, I'm president of the Gospel Music Association now and as, you know, head of the magazine and other magazines as well, that it made too much of a statement for me to review it because I don't normally do reviews. He may have been right about that, but the reason I did it was that we knew it would be sensitive. And we didn't want to have just, you know, one of our freelance writers, you know, handle something that would be so tricky. I just felt like some things needed to be said, and I said them. And above all, I want to speak the truth and speak it in love and let the chips fall where they may. We try not to bow down to advertisers, even to our readers. We don't want to go out of our way to antagonize our readers. There's no joy or value in that. But I think people need to be challenged. They need to be stirred up, and they need to think.
What was the response, the reader response to that particular
Initially,
edition?
it was enormously negative. You know, for those who don't know, the album is called Addicted to Jesus. You know, one of the things I said is I really don't even like the title. Because I think in today's society, and you know, anybody who understands the recovery movement would have a problem with the term addicted, you know, in reference to Jesus. You know, to be addicted to something is not healthy, you know, and...
But when you know Carmen's heart, because I count him as a friend, and when you know his heart, you know that what he's trying to say is, you can go out there and look for things to get hooked on.
Right.
But I've nailed my colors to the mast, and I'm hooked on
Jesus. And we
Jesus.
understand that.
And you knew that.
Sure, and we said at the end of the review, you know, despite all this, it seems really unfair or wrong, it seems somehow wrong, I think was the phrase, to criticize an artist who's so obviously in love with Jesus, you know, and we made the point of how totally committed he is and all that kind of stuff. So I tried to allow for the fact that, you know, it seems weird to say these things, but some things need to be said. The letters at first were overwhelmingly critical, mostly from women, I might add. You can draw your own conclusion from that.
Oh, ooh!
And but then we printed a few negative letters, and they were probably running 75% negative to 25% positive. Because there's another side out there who, it seems to be such a polarizing issue.
It's true, it is very.
There's a group of people who felt like, right on, glad you said that. And of course other people who are just really shocked and saddened and incensed and all that. Then when we printed that first volley of letters, we got a whole nother group of letters responding to the letters that was fairly positive, you know, in coming to our defense. And then it's just this back and forth letters thing that we've now decided we're not going to print any more letters because they're still coming in.
One of the things that I think is a lost art form within the Christian church is the ability to debate. The ability to not always agree with each other, but I know that I get letters when Pat's on the show, he's been away for a few days, but when Pat's on the 700 Club, if he says something and I don't always agree with perhaps some of his positions, I'll always get letters from people saying, how dare you do that to this man of God? And what I want to say to them is, if you knew how much I love and respect this man and that he encourages me to speak the truth as I see it, that because you have that security of relationship of commitment to one another in Christ, you can differ. We seem not to be able to do that in the church in any way without thinking, if I disagree with you, it means I hate you. That's ridiculous.
Right. And of course the Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And I think there's value in debate. And there's too many Christians today who uncritically accept anything that has a Christian label on it. And I think we need to, you know, look at these things. And, you know, they will uncritically reject anything that's so-called secular and uncritically accept anything that's so-called Christian. I think we need to be more discerning than that. And I think there's value in the discussion. And when we do things in the magazine that people disagree with, I feel happy and fulfilled if I've made them think. I'm really not that interested in trying to get people to agree with me. But if I've caused them to think about it, I'm a happy kid.
Well, this happy kid and this happy kid are going to take a short break, and we come back. We'll talk about some other things, about what's happening within the Christian music world. What is the difference between sacred and secular? What has God shown John? We'll talk about that and a lot more when we come back after this break, so please don't go away.
His homelessness gave him a compassion for homeless people. Meet Noah Snyder on the next Heart to Heart.
Every day they pass me by, I can see it in their eyes. Empty people filled with care, headed who knows where.
People need the Lord. People need the Lord. At the end of broken dreams, He's the open door. People need the Lord. People need the Lord. When will we realize?
Join the 700 Club and share God's love with one who's lost.
Do you feel the pain as it touched your life? Can you taste the salt in the tears they cry? Will you love them more than the hate that's been? Will you love see missing part, and with one touch, Lord, you rolled away the stone that held my heart. And now I see that the answer was as easy as just asking you in. And I am so sure I could never doubt your gentle touch again.
Welcome back. My guest today is John Styll, and it's interesting just seeing Keith's face there. I mean, what an incredible gift and talent. At times a very angry man.
Yes.
A man used tremendously by God, and you and he had a lot of debate over the years. What to you were the key elements of what happened between you and Keith Green?
Well, I mean, we had debate because, again, as part of, I think, as journalists, part of our responsibility is to, you know, call people on some of the actions they take. And Keith's heart was a heart of gold, but he and I, we butted heads from time to time, and because he was a new Christian and kind of an angry young man, and I think he admitted that he had made mistakes. One of the things he did is he decided the whole system of selling music was wrong, and so he decided he would offer his album for whatever anyone can afford, which is an admirable thing to do. But we kind of made a comment in the magazine once, like, if these people can't afford records, do they have a $1,000 stereo system to play them on? Or, you know, they managed to afford that, you know, made a comment like that. So he turned around and said, well, yeah, we'll give them something to play it on, you know. And, but he was a remarkable artist, very, very gifted. And I think misunderstood. He referred to himself, you know, we're all parts of the body. He considered himself the elbow. And at the same time, he desperately wanted to be liked, and he was a fun person. You know, in the interview that we have in the book, which is a collection of different interviews, he said sometimes he feels like he lives a little bit of a double life because he's a much more fun-loving person than people would imagine. Laughs a lot, you know, with his wife and so forth. Towards the end of his life, we had dinner out at his ranch about 5 days before the tragic plane crash. And there was a lot of real fence mending that went on. You know, I think he had decided that maybe elbow wasn't his calling, you know, in life, and so he really began to change, and it was a very warm time, and just added to for me personally, the tragedy of the plane accident that took his life a week later.
Let's talk a little bit about the whole division of sacred and secular. A lot of people talk about this. There's a lot of debate about it. What's your perspective?
Well, yeah, we've got Christian music, and we've got secular music, and we've got Christian everything, and we've got secular everything. And I submit that that's a false dichotomy. Sacred and secular is a myth. I mean, there is a real thing called secular, but maybe there shouldn't be for Christians, because that means without God. And I think we should be asking, in reference to a piece of music, for example, not whether, gee, is this a Christian song or is this a secular song? Because, I mean, how can you really determine that? Do you count the number of times Jesus is mentioned by name, or is it by inference, or, you know? I think we need to ask whether something honors God, whether it contains the truth and has integrity and qualities of God, because those are the things that glorify Him. And things are either sin or they're not. The Bible clearly says that God made everything and called it good. So if it's not sin, to me it seems like it has to be called good and under the gaze of God. So to me, if something is Christian, it's Christian by virtue of the perspective that the artist, if you're talking about art, brings to bear on the subject. You know, and I like to think of Christian music as any music by a believing artist that reflects biblical reality, knowing that the Bible talks about every area of life, not just religion and not just the spiritual things. Every area of life is covered by the Bible. And I think that frees us to enjoy a lot of things.
So what would you say to those who write to me and say, well, there's some Christian artists now who are just singing love songs and doing all this kind of stuff, and surely they're wasting the opportunity to really present the gospel?
I don't think that the songs themselves are the powerful communications part. I mean, obviously there's power in songs, but you know, Amy Grant is probably the best example of someone out there right now. She has a big hit song with Baby Baby. Not a Christian song by a traditional definition, because there's no specifically Christian or religious elements to that. But all she's doing is bringing her faith to bear on how, you know, looking at a romantic situation. Well, should God not be part of that? Well, I think that He should, and as Christians, those are things we need to discuss. And everybody in the world who knows about Amy Grant, I think, knows that she's a Christian. She knows what she stands for, and all that kind of thing.
Deeply committed.
Very committed. That's the power for evangelism, as far as I'm concerned. It's like the difference between giving a sales pitch for something, handing someone a brochure about something, or just giving them a product demonstration. Here's how it works in my life. And for her, she's a Christian. She's not going to sing about anything that's anti-biblical or anti-Christian or dishonors God, hopefully. And I don't think she has. And certainly, you know from listening to her album or going to her concert or hearing most interviews that she's definitely a believer, you know, in Jesus. Now that's powerful evangelism for me. I think we get too hung up on the words that are said in a TV interview and they missed an opportunity. Because to me, that's like just giving the sales pitch, and I don't know that that works that well.
Plus, it minimizes the role of the Holy Spirit in people's lives. I think it places everything on us. I've had calls just in the last couple of days from people asking me about Amy, and when her Heart in Motion tour came through our town, I went along, and I have to say, I was amazed by the evening. Obviously, the place was packed with a lot of young girls who just love Amy. But she stopped at one point during the evening and said that, you know, behind all the latest fashion clothes and all the fun stuff, I know that many of you feel really alone. And I want you to know there's a God in heaven who loves you. Yeah. And it couldn't have been more clear. And because it was the only one point in the evening that actually happened, it became all the more noticeable. And, and you could have heard a pin drop in that auditorium. And I felt, I wish some of those people who write to me and say, how can you interview her? You know, this is terrible. I wish they could have been there.
But Christianity is at its core an incarnational faith. It's a faith worked out in daily life and how it actually affects how we live today. You know, and that's what's happening with her. It's the faith working itself out in life, rather than just talking about something that's philosophical.
As you've done this magazine over the years, you must have seen a lot of changes, a lot of new faces, a lot of trends that have come and gone, and things that have endured. Where do you see us today? Where do you think we're at? Are we in a healthy position within the Christian music world?
Well, I think we're in the position to be very healthy, and I think we are healthy. We're kind of at an interesting place with the big success, like we were just talking about, of Amy Grant, an artist not doing specifically Christian music. There's more and more examples of that. I mean, in this past year, it's been a remarkable year for Christian artists, because Michael W. Smith had a top 5 pop hit, top 40. BB and CC Winans have had a #1 album on the Black chart, and 2 #1 singles. Kathy Tricoli, who you saw on our cover a few minutes ago, is in the Billboard's top 40 right now with a song. And man, there's never been Christian artists talking to popular culture like they have before. So for me, I'm thrilled to see them breaking out of the subculture, the Christian subculture, and talking to the mainstream world, because I think that's what shining your light, being salt, is all about. And so I'm happy to see that, but there's a danger there too, that we can become impure, and that people can, you know, the fame and glory and money can be very, very seductive.
Should that be the goal for every artist who's called? What's the difference between those who are called to be out there, to be fragrance, to bring light, and those who are called with a very specific ministry of evangelism? Because there are many artists who are called to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a difference, and very definitely there are artists who are called to minister to the church and be within the church. And I think they need to make it clear that that's what they're doing. And I think artists who want to go out there and talk to the world need to make it very clear that that's what they're doing, because otherwise the wrong expectation is created. Because in the past, we've called it all Christian music. But the experience you have at a Michael W. Smith concert is very different from the experience you have at a Carmen concert. Both are valuable and important, you know, but they're very different. And if you expect the same thing at Carmen's concert that you get at Michael W. Smith's, you'll be disappointed. And if you expect what your experience at Carmen's concert to be duplicated at Amy Grant's or Michael W. Smith's, you're going to be disappointed as well. So I think it's incumbent upon the artist to signal to people what they can expect and to tell what their vision is.
We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask, just briefly, tell us about this new show that we're going to start seeing on television. I'm excited about it.
Well, we're working on finally a Christian music video program. It's going to be called CCM TV on the Family Channel.
Great.
And it should be on Friday nights sometime soon.
Sometime soon?
Hopefully.
Yeah, yes. Okay, let me tell you how to get hold of a couple of things. This is called the Best of CCM Interviews. It has interviews with some fascinating people, with Margaret Becker, with Jimmy Swaggart, with Amy Grant, Petra, Steve Camp, Randy Stonehill, Keith Green, and many, many others. And if you dial that number on your screen, 1-800-288-8087, you can order that book. And also, if you'd like to dial that number, we can take your name and address for a subscription to Contemporary Christian Music Magazine. I enjoy reading it so much, and I think it's something that we can all learn from. It's a kind of public forum where we can all debate and learn from each other. So please dial that number and become part of what God's doing through this magazine. And John, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Sheila.
It's great. Enjoyed it. And stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break.
To purchase a video copy of today's show, call 1-800-288-8087 and ask for the show number on your screen.